It's far from profound to say all the god forms in Dragon Ball Super are more divisive than any of the prior Super Saiyan forms when it comes to thoughts on them, and it's obvious from the title which side I stand on the topic. But why? I can tell you from the start it's not for the surface level one like, it's just a palette swap. I'd prefer more visually striking design for them, but not at the loss of substance for style. And this is where the wasted potential of the god forms come in, with the writing decisions behind them, hindering what could have otherwise been good or at least acceptable forms. Starting with Super Saiyan God, I will say that some of the ideas or confirmation of God Ki, such as not being sensed, tie into Taoist beliefs of Chi being summoned from another dimension, and one not enlightened to cultivating their Chi cannot sense or even see the flow of a master's Chi. God Ki, however, is also an issue, as the idea that it's treated as a tier above what can be achieved through regular Ki definitely isn't the case when the Kaioshin and their attendants clearly had it, and mortals could still far surpass them. Some criticise those without God Ki, such as Jiren or Broly, approaching the level of a Hakaishin, but this simply goes to show the implications of the wall separating Ki and God Ki's limits was flawed from the start. Though you'd still be right to criticise Broly being so strong at the very least. There's also the issue that what God Ki can offer Goku and Vegeta is vague or redundant depending on the continuity. The anime suggests it provides some low-level regeneration, but there's very little explanation on what else it can or cannot offer, that just grinding without it like the top-of-the-line protein grey wouldn't. There's then the ritual allowing it to be unlocked, and its arbitrary requirement. The ritual requiring pure-hearted Saiyans means it at least couldn't have been easily accessed at all in prior arcs, without Tarbell and Broly come to Earth for no reason at least. But the requirements of 6 Saiyans bring their Ki into one is completely random as to why these specifics are needed, or how this produces God Ki. Also, GT did a similar thing first and more consistently. Speaking of which, you may recall what I said in my video on Super Saiyan 4, and how it upholds the rules of consistent power systems in building on what came before, whereas Super Saiyan God ignores that rule beyond God Ki having been a thing, and has entirely arbitrary acquisition. What's more, Vegeta shows this wasn't the only way to acquire it, when getting it off screen, and with no implication of a ritual, making it a poorly handled new addition. Then there's its evolution in Super Saiyan Blue, a form that had no build-up thought except some vague modicum of it in the anime. Kakarot redeemed that though. This had a few good elements in premise, such as the colour symbolising calmness and thereby implied a refinement of God Ki, with a more enlightened consciousness than before. And then the anime and especially the manga do the exact opposite, with it being treated as a stamina draining form that needed further mastery. Something that should be a redundant point with what it symbolised, with the unrefined role fitting its predecessor's more strict time limit. I will at least give its anime self more praise, in it being shown to have greater Ki control than God, as well as Super Saiyan 2 and 3, with it being used to better regulate Goku's Ki for what opponent he faces, and it being implied that this aided in him stacking Kaioken on top of it, though this makes the offhand mention of it having bad stamina both forced and contradictive. This is especially egregious when, rather than focus on the interesting implications it had on Goku's cultivation journey and refined skills, we're handed off to the next form I'll dissect. Also, there's not much to add to Vegeta's Super Saiyan Blue evolution, with it being just an amped up version of Blue's power. I was initially not going to cover the 2 manifestations of godly techniques, but as they've been made their own forms under Saiyan usage, they fit the bill well enough. Ultra Instinct is probably the most well received of Super's god forms, with it definitely having more potential in drawing on martial arts philosophies such as the flow state, and actively showcasing calmness in battle better than Super Saiyan Blue. The issue with this though is that these are skills Goku already had, with moving instinctually already being something shown as Popo's skill, and calmness in battle being associated with his character in general since Namek. Also, to draw on a martial arts principle many real-life humans can utilize as a skill, for one who has surpassed martial arts gods, seems quite backwards. Some of this could have been mitigated if not for its method of acquisition being even more backwards in both continuities. The anime has it initially unlocked through Goku taking a strong enough attack, which is very antithetical for a technique meant to dodge, and the manga having Goku achieve it after having to be reminded of the skills he had been taught and utilised long after having studied under these masters, by Muten Roshi having somehow achieved an incomplete Ultra Instinct through doing Shugyo in secret, in what's at most a little over 2 decades as opposed to centuries of time to gain it prior. I guess it goes to show the only idea those adapting Toriyama's notes could think of to add more to Goku's progression as a fighter was to force regression of it. I will say though, the manga version does have a redeeming aspect in Goku's second usage of Ultra Instinct Sign, having him acknowledge that drawn on anger for strength isn't the right way to go about things, very much in line with Dragon Ball's Budo Taoist elements I've talked of extensively before. If this was where he acquired the technique, it would have been a fairly good story beat, beyond his weird statements of letting people down, despite that being the opposite of what he's done consistently when it comes to battle. Even if I were to concede it's reasonable for Goku's instincts and calmness to be improved further than in the original manga, the focus on the former is tracked fairly inconsistently, with him spending a fair percentage of his fights taking hits rather than dodging them, which brings things into Goku's true Ultra Instinct. I'll actually say I find the premise of this worth some praise. Despite what Goku says about his heart not being calm, this isn't so much antithetical to Ultra Instinct, and more so him calming his mind when letting his Saiyan fighting instincts play their part, combining his Saiyan nature with his experience as a martial artist of a Budo mindset, in what's the closest Super can come to replicating the ideas behind Super Saiyan 4. The Saiyan's ability to evolve through battle, with genetic mutations such as the Super Saiyan forms, also doesn't make it inconsistent that Goku can utilize his own version despite Whis saying that the mastered Ultra Instinct was the true version. The issues, however, lie in its execution, as the unrefined nature of it leaves him dodging far less than the previous one, which goes against the simple rule that the less damage you take, the more likely you are to win. And we'll get to a bigger ignorance of that soon. And that the catalyst for Goku gaining this is learning his father did a similar thing purely because he wanted to win, which has issues in how forced it is that I've already covered in my Bardock video. It's with that we turn to the Yan of Ultra Instincts In, with Ultra Ego. This form is a good idea in premise for Vegeta drawn on his Saiyan instincts, much as Goku is now doing, and has the potential to reach a balance with how his current method of Shugyo to emulate Beerus's mastery of instinctual movements and unwavering mindset is going. In execution though, it's quite possibly the most worthless Saiyan transformation in the series, in it not progressing the plot in any positive or negative way that couldn't be achieved in his lower forms with some tweaks to the power scaling of the arc, but more on that soon. The idea of a form which makes you stronger the more damage you take is the opposite of Ultra Instinct, but in the most flawed way possible, with it making more sense in a fight to avoid unnecessary damage, and this showing in there being a limit to how much damage he can take, which goes against the point of it entirely. Before moving on to an overarching point, I ought to mention Toppo's Hakaishin mode in the Super anime. The idea of him abandoning justice for survival, and how his abandoning of ideals makes him antithetical to Vegeta, who infuses aspects of destruction into his ideals, are okay, but these ideas are made meaningless when it's made clear earlier that he'd already abandoned justice for survival, and yet didn't transform there. His form also has no impact on the plot beyond Vegeta getting a dramatic win. in a way that contradicts the logistics and themes of self-destructive techniques, making it a waste of time. Going back to the point of Ultra Ego not adding plot progression, this is one of the most overarching flaws to all the god forms mentioned, as each of them fails to be a worthwhile payoff to the story arcs they are attached to. Unlike the original manga, in which the Super Saiyan forms are either what allowed for a conclusion to be brought, or opened up new directions in the plot and characters through failing to do so. Super Saiyan God, causing Beerus to find it worth sparing Earth, worked in the original film where Goku's power managed to surpass half of Beerus's own, but this is made redundant in the retellings of the arc, where he merely sees the potential Goku could have, which, with what's revealed of the strength of other universes' mortals, isn't something Beerus should have found interesting. Blue ended up having no specific purpose against Gold and Frieza that God couldn't have played. Thank you Kakarot DLC for remedying this. Had little specific role against Hit when the outcome of the battle could have been accomplished with just God or the lower Super Saiyan forms with some changes to power scaling. And its perfected version in the manga only proved a temporary roadblock for Zamasu. Ultra Instinct had more relevance in plot and character development, but still fell far from the previous standard, with it not being what overcame Jiren, and even wearing him down being something it wouldn't be necessary for if he wasn't presented as more overwhelmingly strong than Toriyama's take seemed to imply. Even in the Moro arc that placed the most focus on Ultra Instinct as a payoff, Goku using it to get the win came about through Oob's God Key bailing him out, which goes against what Whis advised Goku on, in trusting in his own strength. His true version of it also failed to defeat Gas, or even alter the plot around him beyond him becoming stronger. Then there's Ultra Ego, a form that just ended up being a very temporary distraction for Granola, and then a quick punching bag for Gas, before Goku got the spotlight. At the very least, the two God technique forms have the potential to be taken in good directions in the future, but that doesn't stop the usage of these forms in Super's narrative as of now having been completely wasted. Thank you if having watched all of this video. If interested in another critique of Super's missed opportunities, you may be interested in this video of its mishandling of the multiverse. Check out this playlist as well for my prior Dragon Ball analyses, and I'll see you later.